It's 1917, which and they started making these in 1914, and they started making cars.
In 1914, two brothers made a decision that looked impossible, and nobody realized they were about to change the automobile forever. In the early 1910s, nearly every automobile on the road was still built the same way horse-drawn carriages had been built for generations. A wooden frame formed the body's structure, with thin steel or aluminum panels carefully hand-fitted over it by skilled craftsmen. It worked well enough, and every major manufacturer already owned the tools and expertise to keep building cars this exact way, which meant that in 1914, most automobiles were, structurally speaking, a horse-drawn carriage that had simply fired the horse and kept the wood. Two brothers who'd spent years building precision engines for other people's cars were about to bet everything on the idea that the entire body deserved to be replaced, not just improved. This video takes you inside the real story of how the Dodge Brothers Model 30 was built, the factory, the steel, and one manufacturing partnership that quietly changed how automobiles would eventually be manufactured. Right now, let's step inside. Long before the Dodge brothers built their first car, the wood and metal method carried problems that grows harder to ignore as production increased. Wood absorbed moisture, expanded and contracted with the weather, and slowly warped with age. Joints loosened. Bodies developed squeaks and rattles. Every frame demanded careful hand-fitting, since no two pieces of wood were ever quite alike, meaning every body coming off the line was, in its own small way, a slightly different car. Engines kept improving year after year, and manufacturing techniques advanced steadily. Yet the automobile body itself remained tied to traditions from the carriage era. But the strangest part of this story isn't that two brothers eventually built a new car. It's what they chose to remove from it. John and Horace Dodge didn't begin their careers building automobiles. Years before their badge appeared on a radiator, the brothers had built a reputation in the bicycle business, designing precision ball bearings and durable mechanical components. That engineering focus carried them into Detroit's growing auto industry, where they built a machine shop known for exceptional accuracy. Their company soon produced engines, transmissions, axles, and precision parts for manufacturers including Oldsmobile, before becoming Henry Ford's most important supplier. Much of the early Model T depended on components the Dodge brothers built. For years, their name appeared on invoices and internal specifications, not on the finished cars themselves. They understood better than almost anyone in Detroit exactly what went into building a reliable automobile, since they'd spent years supplying the parts that made other people's cars actually work. After years of building automobiles that carried someone else's name, they made a decision few expected: leave the role of supplier behind and build a car that reflected their own standards of strength and reliability. At first glance, wood hardly seemed like a problem worth solving. It had built carriages for generations, factories were already equipped for it, and switching meant an enormous investment in new steel presses and dies. Keeping wood meant lower upfront cost and fewer risks, so most companies simply kept building the way they always had. There was a certain comfort in that logic. Why gamble on an unfamiliar material when the familiar one had always gotten the job done? But beneath that familiar method, cracks were beginning to show. Wooden structures shifted over time, reducing consistency from one body to the next. Everybody needed extra hand adjustment before final assembly, slowing production and making true mass manufacturing difficult. And then, one engineer proposed an idea most of the industry considered impossible. That opportunity arrived with an engineer named Edward G. Budd. In 1912, Budd founded his own manufacturing company around a simple, ambitious belief: automobiles no longer needed wooden skeletons hidden beneath their metal skin. The challenge was never really whether steel was stronger than wood. The challenge was whether an entire industry built around wood could be convinced to change. Every panel produced this way would match the next with remarkable consistency, cutting down on hand-fitting while opening the door to genuinely fast, repeatable production, the kind wood had never really allowed. It sounded convincing on paper. In practice, most manufacturers refused to take the risk. New machinery, unfamiliar production methods, and no guarantee customers would even notice the difference. But the Dodge brothers saw something others missed. They partnered with Budd and placed one of his first major orders for steel automobile bodies, betting that stronger construction would become a real competitive advantage. Inside the Dodge brothers' new Hamtramck factory, years of planning finally became reality. Massive dies shaped identical steel panels with remarkable consistency before they were assembled into complete bodies. a process aimed at precision from the very first step, unlike anything most of the industry was attempting. Workers no longer had to shape every wooden frame individually. Steel panels arrived with consistent dimensions, allowing the same body design to be repeated again and again without the hand-fitting that wood had always demanded. The finished steel body was then mounted onto a separate steel chassis, carrying the engine, transmission, axles, and running gear. It looked familiar from a distance. Underneath the paint was something the industry had rarely seen. This was the moment everything changed. The Dodge brothers hadn't simply built another automobile. They had removed the wooden skeleton that had defined car construction for generations. The Dodge brothers Model 30 became the first mass-produced automobile to feature an all-steel body, at a time when most competitors still relied on wooden frameworks. On November 14, 1914, the first production Dodge automobile was completed at the company's Hamtramck facility. Only 249 vehicles were completed before the end of that year, yet those few automobiles proved that the future of car bodies would no longer be built from wood. Steel delivered far greater strength and rigidity than wood, resisting twisting forces and holding its shape with much better dimensional accuracy. It also ignored most of the problems that had plagued wooden construction for years. No more swelling in the rain, no more loosening joints, no more squeaks creeping in as the frame aged. For a buyer used to a car that rattled a little more every winter, that alone was worth noticing. Manufacturing benefited just as much. Because stamped steel panels reproduced almost identically, workers spent far less time hand-adjusting parts, making output more consistent and scaling production far easier than with individually fitted wooden bodies. One especially clever detail made the difference obvious. Steel allowed manufacturers to use higher temperature finishing processes that would have damaged or warped a traditional wooden frame. Whether the rest of the industry had simply never thought to ask why, or preferred not to, isn't something the historical record bothers to clarify. The finishing process became faster and far more suitable for large-scale automobile production. The steel body was only part of the story. The Dodge brothers filled their first car with equipment many competitors still treated as optional or skipped entirely. Buyers received an electric starter, electric lights, a windshield, a folding top, leather upholstery, a speedometer, and a smooth 35-horsepower four-cylinder engine paired with a modern 3-speed transmission. Its price of $785 was noticeably higher than Ford's Model T, which immediately raised eyebrows. But buyers quickly realized they were paying for engineering and durability that arrived as standard equipment, not expensive extras. The Dodge brothers weren't trying to build the cheapest car on the road. They were determined to build one that justified every dollar of it. The response surprised even the industry itself. Orders arrived almost immediately, and demand quickly outpaced the small number of cars leaving Hamtramck. Within a year, Dodge had earned a growing reputation for dependability, and by 1915, the company had become America's third-largest automobile manufacturer, an extraordinary achievement for a brand that had only recently entered the market. That kind of jump was almost unheard of for a brand-new nameplate, competing against manufacturers who'd been building cars for years. People weren't simply buying another car. They believed they were buying one built to a genuinely higher standard, and that belief turned into one of Dodge's most valuable assets. Trust that no advertising campaign could have manufactured on its own. The success of the Model 30 sent a message competitors could no longer ignore. Manufacturers slowly began moving away from wooden body construction, investing instead in steel stamping equipment. Edward Budd's company went on to supply steel bodies to other automakers, spreading the technology across the entire industry. The shift didn't happen overnight. Wooden construction lingered for years, especially in enclosed bodies, while engineers steadily refined the new manufacturing techniques. But the direction was set, and there was no real path back to carriages with the horse removed. Calling it a quiet decision might be underselling it slightly. It's the kind of quiet that ends up rewriting an entire industry's blueprint, while almost nobody outside Hamtramck notices it happening. The Model 30 did not simply replace wood with steel. It proved that automobile manufacturing itself could be redesigned from the ground up. More than a century later, the basic idea introduced in 1914 still shapes every factory producing cars today.